guys don't understand when we have a baptism, that water's about 85 degrees. I'm not complaining, it feels pretty good. Okay? That's why we're chest waders underneath of it, so I'm sweating like crazy. But I'd rather have it 85 degrees. One time I was doing a baptism, and I woke up the Sunday morning and I said, something's not right. The baptism didn't get done. Which, you know, is not necessarily a bad problem if the water wasn't 37 degrees. And I warned the young man who was getting baptized. He was a teenager, said, works for me. He was bringing booze to awesome in 37 degree water, just want you to know. I want you to think about your family for just a moment. You heard the word before, patriarchs or patriarch. You know, we don't necessarily use that terminology in America, but what we might say is our great-grandfather or great-great-grandfather, families from a long time ago. And I thought about that with my family. If my grandfather didn't have a father, and if he didn't have a father, then I wouldn't be here, would I? You see, we can trace way back to a patriarch, that one who has started, if you will. And I was thinking about some of the Old Testament people. Those in the Old Testament who were patriarchs. You ever thought about that before? There's some people found in the Old Testament who were very interesting. And some of them you're probably going to recognize right off the bat. Okay? Abraham. In fact, if you've been in church for very long, you might even start going, Father Abraham. And then, right? Okay, you might start singing that song. And I want you to know something about him. And I'm sharing with you this morning about Abraham because, you know, many times in our lives, we're not convinced that we are capable of doing something because we have a flaw. Or we're flawed, or we think that we're flawed. And I want you to know something. Abraham was a man of faith. Okay? But there was others along the way who had some struggles. And there's others who are used by God who are, by worldly standards, were terrible people. If you ever study the life in the New Testament of the Apostle Paul, before he became a Christian, he was a terrible person as far as the world would have been concerned. He wanted to destroy anything that had to do with God, or at least with Jesus and the church, until someone got a hold of him, until God got a hold of him. So Abraham was a man of faith. And there's another one in the Old Testament. His name was Isaac. Isaac was a man, he was the son of promise. He was promised to his father, who was very old, right? And then the third one I want you to think about is this one as well. How about Jacob? You ever thought about Jacob before? Jacob was the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. And I want you to think about who he is. I want you to think about this. But there's one other person you probably have never really thought about before. His name is Joseph. All right? You may not have thought about Joseph before. If you've read your Bible enough, you'll probably say, isn't he the guy that was the husband of Mary? Well, that's not what I'm talking about, just so you know. Think back to the Old Testament for a moment and to Joseph of the Old Testament. I want to share just a little bit about his life to you. And I want you to think about something. I shared with you Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But when you read the book of Genesis, there's more time spent talking about Joseph than any other person. Okay? Than any other person. Think about that for a moment. So do you think he probably is a person we should pay attention to? Do you think maybe there's something about his life that we can learn, we can apply to who we are, who God wants us to be, and who God wants us to be as a church? You think that's a good possibility? I think it is. And as we look at his life and see what it was that he was about, and I want you to understand something else about Joseph. In the book of Genesis, not one single time was he reproved. Not one single time was there problems associated with him. Well, you're going to find out in just a few moments his brothers didn't like him a whole bunch. All right? But I want to share this with you. I want you to see some things about him. I want you to see things about who he is. You know, one of the interesting things about presidential campaigns, and they're coming up, if you didn't know that, it's been going on for a while. And what they're always trying to do is, really what they're trying to do, is trying to sell their character. Okay? And I'm going to know something. A person's policies will always reflect their character. Okay? Please understand, it will reflect who they are and what they believe. Now, in our lives, we all have character, don't we? We have character. This morning, I want to share some little bit of some things about this life of Joseph, this character of him, this character of who he is, and something that maybe you've never really thought about before. So Joseph was a man who was devoted to God. He was a man who was very much devoted to God. He was a man who had noble character. He was pure in heart and pure in his life. So he had, if you would, he would have high moral character, high moral standards. He was also a person who was a phenomenal ruler. We'll find out in just a little bit. He was a phenomenal ruler of the people of Egypt. In fact, the Bible tells us there was only one higher than he once he became in that position, and that was Pharaoh. So he was a phenomenal ruler over the people of Egypt. He was also that ruler with noble character, and again, with pure in heart. If you would please, we're going to move around and we're going to do some things here, but I want to start out with Joseph. I want to start out with where he came from, because I want you to think about where you have come from. I want you to think about where you have come from and how God will use you if you simply let him do so. All right? So we're going to be in Genesis. Turn with me, please, to Genesis chapter 37. I want you to see about this man named Joseph. And the very first thing I want you to understand is that Joseph was living in Canaan. Okay? And here we see again, Genesis chapter 37, starting there in verse 2. And it says this. It says, this is the history of Jacob. So those of you who like history, pay close attention to this, okay? This is the history of Joseph, of Jacob. And it says, Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brothers. And the lad was with his sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, and his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report of them to his father. So we also find, if you would please, go down just a little bit further to verse 3 of the same chapter. And listen to what it says. It says, now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age. Also he made him a tunic of many colors. Please pay close attention to verse 4. And it says this, but when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. So let's look at a few things. First and foremost is that Joseph was a tattletale. Did you catch that part? I don't know if you guys caught that or not, but he's a tattletale. Okay, if you go back there, if you go back up there to verse 2, it says there, and he made a bad report to his father. He was a tattletale. All right. I don't know about you, but nobody likes a tattletale. Okay? So here he is, he's a tattletale, he's going back and he's saying, Dad, you're not going to believe what my brothers are doing. He's tattling all over him, right? So now we see it even further. The second thing that we also find out here is that his daddy loved him more than he loved them. So not only is he a tattletale, which made them not to like him, and even more is that now they knew his father cared more about him. So there's 2 strikes against Joseph. 2 strikes. All right? And so here are his brothers who didn't like him, who didn't really have much good to say about him. And we know further on that down in this chapter that he started having dreams, that Joseph started having dreams. And he was telling these dreams to his brothers. And basically the dreams were this, that he was going to rule over his brothers, and that made him even madder. Strike 3. All right? He tattled on them. Dad loved him more than them, and he was telling them about the dreams that he was having. And his brothers took those dreams as though he was telling them that he was going to rule over them. Do you know what happened years later? Exactly that. But his brothers didn't take it that way. Okay, so strike 3 takes place. So Joseph here himself has got himself into trouble. But as you think about this for a moment, how many of you can say that maybe your brother or sister may have thought you were the favorite child? And you guys that way? My sister used to think that I was the favorite child. Maybe I was. I don't know. I never thought about it before. But I remember her multiple times saying, well, you like him more than me. All right? Kids, I want you to know something. Your parents really don't favor one over the other. they love you all the same. Okay? They really, some of you guys know that's not true. It's very true. Okay? Very, very true. I had someone once say to me, I know who your favorite child is. And I said, who is that? And they said, Caleb. I said, absolutely not. Well, sure it is. I said, no, just because you like doing things with one child, that doesn't mean they're your favorite child. Am I right, Mom? Dad? That doesn't mean the case. So in this particular case, though, his father had no problem with making sure that his brothers and others knew he was his favorite child. And in fact, let's look down for just a moment. Let's see how favored he really was with his dad. One of the things that happened is that as people in this time frame history, they would go about feeding their flocks. And just as we don't have it so much today as we did then, that they would take these flocks sometimes days' journey to get food and to find water and other things. So the picture here is that Joseph's brothers have left. Joseph's brothers have left with the flocks, and his dad is going to say to him, you need to go find them, and let's see what happens in verse 13 of chapter 37. Okay? It says this. It says this to you and to me. And Israel said to Joseph, are not your brothers feeding the flock in Shechem? Come, I will send you to them. So he said to him, here I am. Okay, so here is Joseph. You think he knows his daddy likes him the best? I bet he does. Do you think that he didn't know his brothers hated him? I guarantee he had some pretty sense that something was going on. And so here he is now, and his dad's saying, you need to go check on your brothers. The very same brothers who hate you. Think about this for a moment. Now he didn't say that to him, but the Bible tells us what? His brothers hated him. Okay? Now, whether they told him or not, we don't know that, do we? But I promise you this, that if I don't like you or you don't like me, we'll pick up on it pretty quick. You don't have to use words. So here we see his brothers. We see them. He's going to find his brothers, the same very brothers who hated him. But the second point here I want you to see about Joseph, he was faithful to his father. I can tell you as a parent, one of my biggest pet peeves is when you have your children to do something and they grumble at you. Like, why do I have to do that? It's not mine. As you sit there and clean the dishes that they made from dinner. Those aren't mine. Don't you love that with kids? Husbands, you don't do that to your wives, do you? It's not mine. Okay, so here we go. He's going out. He says, okay, Dad, I'm going to go and do exactly what it is that you want me to do. So he's going to go out and he finds his brothers. Now remember, he's the favorite son, hated by his brothers, and he told his brothers that at one time, eventually, not just to his brothers, to his dad, that you will eventually bow down to me. That doesn't sit well when you're the youngest. Okay? When you're the youngest, and you're trying to tell the older ones this. But this is exactly what happens. And I want you to know something. This is a recipe for disaster. Okay? A recipe for disaster. You have his brothers out there feeding the flock. You have his brothers out there and in some way coming up with some plan to get rid of this troublemaker, the one who they hated, the one they didn't like. Because the Bible tells us that when they see their brother coming, that they started talking to one another. Here comes that dreamer. Here comes our little brother. Now I can imagine some of them maybe even thought, the one daddy loves better than us. Listen, a sibling rivalry never goes away. Okay? It doesn't go away. So here we see that, and we're seeing this take place. And I want you to know something. We're not going to read the next passage about this, but what happens is this. His brothers came up with a plan. And they said, we'll take care of this. We'll take care of this dreamer. We'll take care of this troublemaker. We'll take care of this one who is loved by Daddy more than we are. And they sold him into slavery. And here's the thing about that. Have you ever guys heard of the snowball effect? The snowball effect is basically this. That you start one thing and leads to another and leads to another, and everything just starts becoming out of control. Now, his brothers hated him. His brothers knew that their dad loved him more than, in fact, his dad showed this love by giving a coat of many colors. Showed this love that he had for him. So his brothers, of course, planned. they've sold him into slavery. Now the snowball effect comes in. And the Bible tells us that they sold their brother into slavery, that they killed one of the flock, put blood on the jacket of the favorite son, took it back to their dad and said, an animal ate it, Dad. So the snowball effect just continues. It continues, and they continue to lie. They continue to have build on this hatred. It just continues to spin and spin and spin. And here's the thing. There is no indication in the Bible they even cared that they broke their dad's heart. None whatsoever. Because you see, when they went back and told their dad, the Bible tells us that he acted accordingly as a father. That he mourned for his son. And you see, we need to understand here, this is the whole thing going on, this whole idea that he has been sold, and now he's in Egypt. We're going to pick that up in verse 39. Now, I want you to see for your life, guys, people might treat you unfairly. They might even treat you like a piece of dirt, like a floor mat. They might treat you as if you don't even exist. But I want you to know that God is aware of who you are, God is aware of your circumstances, and God very much loves you. And He's very much aware of what's happening in your life. And here He is, again, everything that has happened to Joseph. How many of you might be bitter at this point? I'll show them. I think they're doing is selling me into slavery. But here was Joseph. Remember his character. Remember his character is important. His character, as I shared with you, a pure heart. A young man who truly was obedient to his father. And now here in chapter 39, verse 1, listen to what it says. It says, now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. And Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites, who had taken him down there. Now, one of the things here that we have to see is that here he is, that he has been taken away into captivity. Guys, there's times in which we can look at our circumstances and let our circumstances determine what we do or do not do. All right? And in this particular case, Joseph could have had the biggest pity party for himself there ever was on the face of this earth. How dare my brothers do this to me? How dare somebody treat me badly? You ever been there? How dare somebody do that to me? I didn't do anything wrong. I haven't done anything. Guys, we all face that in life. And what you do with it, what I do with it, is going to greatly determine our character. It's going to greatly determine how people see you, how people see our church. And here we see this character, here we see his character coming out. We see that, that he has been taken in by a pretty high official among the people in the government with Pharaoh. I want you to know that even though that Joseph could have really written this off and said, oh my, God is watching over him. In your life, there's times in which it's going to seem like God is not there, that He doesn't care, that He's not interested. But He is. He's very interested. And here is Joseph. Here is Joseph. He very easily, listen, he could have easily had a pity party for himself. He easily could have said, I don't know, I don't get this. I haven't done nothing wrong. I mean, come on, I told my brothers about the dream. I don't know what the big deal is about that. All right? Come on, my daddy loves me. I don't know what the big deal is that. Dad loves me more than them. That's not my fault. Okay, and they had the nerve to sell me into Egypt. He could have had a bad attitude about the whole thing, couldn't he? All right? So here we see in verse 39, chapter 39, verse 1, we see God taking care of Joseph. I want you to know something. In your life, in the life of our church, if we are doing the things God intends for us to do, there's going to be times in which we feel like we're thrown down in a pit, and then we get pulled out and sold into slavery, is what happened to Joseph. There's going to be times in which we think nobody cares. There's going to be times in which we think nobody even has any idea I exist. But yet here is Joseph, and here is God, and God does the same thing for you and me. He knows you. He knows the circumstances in your life. He knows the circumstances in my life. He knows our circumstances, and He's not left you. He hasn't left you, never has, never will. Be excited about that fact. So here's Joseph. He has been treated horribly by the ones who should have loved him the most, by the ones who should have been there for him. And they sold him into slavery, but God is right there for him. But I want you to know something, that we're finding that the whole idea of Joseph here in chapter 39, please understand, I am not trying to run through these scriptures super fast this morning, but we don't have time to read chapters of Genesis here, okay? So I'm trying to share with you what's taking place in these chapters. So here in chapter 39, after we see that Joseph was sold into slavery, that he was sold into slavery to Potiphar, that God didn't do this by accident. The Bible tells us also, too, that Potiphar allowed Joseph to become in charge of his house. The Bible also tells us that Potiphar's wife took notice of him. And that Potiphar's wife did everything that she could to get Joseph to have an affair with her. But remember what I said earlier, Joseph's character would not allow that to happen. And it didn't. It did not happen. In fact, it made his wife so mad that she told her husband, this slave you brought into our home tried to rape me. He tried it. And of course, Potiphar was extremely angry. And we know that he was extremely angry that he would have such nerve to do such a thing. But I want you to know that what happens to him was also further on. And it tells us here that in verse 20 of chapter 39, it says, then Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison. So now he was sold into slavery. He had it really good working in the house of Potiphar. And now he's thrown into the prison. Now, if you've been paying close attention to what I've shared with you, God has blessed him all along the way, hasn't he? In our lives, God will bless us. There might be circumstances which it feels like that's not going to happen. And maybe we might be, it felt like we're thrown into a prison. And here we see that Potiphar took him, had him thrown into prison. Hear me this morning, please. They did not have a weight room, a place to study law, and to watch television, okay? They were thrown into prison. It was a horrible experience. However, the Bible tells us that God was with him. That God was with him in there. And it tells us there in verse 23, it says, and the keeper of the prison did not look into anything that was under Joseph's authority. It tells us that the prison guard, the in charge of the prison, took Joseph and let him have charge of the prison. So now he went from having charge of Potiphar's home to having in charge of the prison. And in fact, he was in such a leadership role, such a position that he had, Potiphar never worried about him. It was Potiphar's wife who was the one that had the problem. It was Potiphar. So he is thrown into prison, and here's his prison guard. Now, today, if the prisoners break out, there's going to be an investigation, and guards might lose their job. Some of them might even go to jail for what maybe they'd helped as prisoners escape. But during Joseph's time and other times, those guys lost their lives if a prisoner escaped. So how trustworthy do you think Joseph was to this prison, the head of the prison? Very, very trustworthy. So he's put him in charge of this prison. He has allowed him, this is what is taking place as he is now in charge of this. And if you'd like to read the whole story of what's happening with Joseph in prison, you can start here in chapter 39 and read through chapter 41, okay, of Genesis. You can see the story. You can see what happened in Joseph's life. You can see exactly what happened to him. But how many of you remember I shared with you that Joseph had dreams? Okay? And Joseph had these dreams that that his brothers would bow down to him, that his daddy would bow down to him. And God gave Joseph an ability to interpret dreams. You ever have a dream and go, what in the world is that about? Okay? Well, here's Joseph. Here's Joseph in prison. Now remember, he is in charge of the prison. And I want you to understand that verse 40, okay, verse 1, listen to what it says. It says, and it came to pass after these things, again, after he was made in charge, the keeper of the prison, after God made him prosper, it says there at the end of verse 23 of chapter 39, God has made him prosper. And it says here that came to pass after these things, that the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their lord the king. And Pharaoh was angry with his two official officers, the chief priest, the chief butler, and the chief baker. So he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard. in the prison. Who's in charge of the prison? Joseph. What does Joseph have the ability to do? Read dreams. All right? So what happens is while they're in jail, while they're in prison, this cupbearer and this cupbearer here and the cook, they come in. Here they are, the baker, and they come in and they have dreams. And who do you think interpreted their dreams? Joseph. Why was Joseph in prison to interpret those dreams? Why? It wasn't because Potiphar's wife was all upset and Potiphar had him put in jail by her father. I mean, that was the surface of it all. But God knew that ultimately that Joseph was going to be in charge of Egypt. The only way you can do that is have audience before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh's got to like you, and Pharaoh's got to trust you. So here we see this taking place, that he has now got them in jail. And that the baker and the butler are now there. They both had dreams. One lost their life. The other was restored back to the throne, just as Joseph promised would happen. And so as we look through this, I want you to know, even though he was in jail, listen, even though in your life, it may not feel like you're being blessed. Even though in your life, it may not seem like God even cares. Remember, if anybody had a right to have a pity party for themselves, in my opinion, when you read the scriptures, is Joseph. Joseph could have said, woe is me, here we go again. I didn't do anything to Potiphar's wife. I was not even interested. And here I am in jail because she lied about me. You ever been lied about? Okay, here he is. Did he hold a grudge? No. He wasn't. We don't have no indication whatsoever in the scripture that this is what took place. But yet here he is, that he interpreted these dreams for the cupbearer, for the butler, and for the chief baker. And here he was, and they said, hey, thank you for interpreting our dreams. And if we ever get out of here, we'll make sure Pharaoh knows what you did for us. Guess what happened? Does anybody remember? Nothing. He got left in prison. Until one day, the Bible tells us that Pharaoh had a dream. And who could interpret dreams? Joseph. And then Pharaoh had this dream, and all of a sudden, it clicked. Oh, wait a minute, I knew this guy in prison one time. He told me I'd have my position back with Pharaoh. Here I am. And he said, I know this guy in prison. And Pharaoh summoned for him. And he cleaned himself up, the Bible tells us. He cleaned himself up, and he went back to Pharaoh, and he went and he interpreted the dreams that Pharaoh had. He interpreted those, that there would be time of plenty and there would be time of famine, and that he had to interpret these dreams with Pharaoh. We need to remember who God is, and God can do anything through you, anything through me, and anything through His church. All we have to do is put our trust in Him and allow Him to work through us and do the things He wants us to do. And here's Joseph. I'm going to tell you what. To me, it's kind of weird. This is how God worked through this whole circumstance. Why couldn't God just put him there to begin with, right? Why couldn't He have done that? Because obviously Joseph had to learn some things along the way. Obviously, he needed to be able to learn things about himself, gain trust of the Pharaoh. He had to learn a lot of different things, and that's why he went through that. You might be saying, I'm going through some things. I'm not sure what it is I'm supposed to learn. Then look a little harder. Okay? Because we never go through something that we're not supposed to learn from. It might be simply, well, I really messed up there. I shouldn't have done that. Or whatever it might be, but trust God. That don't be afraid to let Him understand that you need Him and He wants to. But I want you to know something. Throughout this whole thing, Joseph kept his integrity. Joseph kept in place who he was. Joseph made sure that his relationship with God was right. And here he was being brought before Pharaoh. And here in Genesis chapter 41, we find that he is brought before Pharaoh. It tells us there in verse 41, verse 2. It says, suddenly there came up on the river, as he's interpreting the dream of the 7 cows fine, and he's looking and fed in meadow. And it goes on and says, here's the bad-looking cows. But here he is standing before Pharaoh. Here he is. And we can see that this is what is all about, that God has ultimately brought him before someone where he would be able to save lives. Now, one of the things, if you go down, please, to verse 38 of chapter 41. I want you to see something. It says, so the advice was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find such a one as this, a man in whom is the Spirit of God? Here was Joseph standing before Pharaoh. Who do you think had the Spirit of God in him? Who do you think that Pharaoh's going to choose to store up all the grain that they have so when the lean years come, there's going to be food? Joseph. And by the way, not because Joseph was special, but because Joseph allowed himself to be led by God. He allowed himself to be used by God. That's why he got to this position. And by the way, later on he tells his brothers, he didn't do anything wrong. God had a plan. God had a plan. That's why I am here. That is what it is truly all about. So God uses Joseph. He makes him. He goes from being in the home of Potiphar. Actually, he started out in a well. That his brothers pulled him out, sold him, and then he ended up in the house of Potiphar, where his wife had him thrown into jail by her words. And then pulled up out of jail, brought before the king. And I want you to know what the Bible also tells us, that he became the number 2 man in Egypt. In fact, the Bible tells us that Pharaoh looked at Joseph and said this, I am the only one above you. That means now Joseph was bigger than who? Potiphar. He was bigger. He had more power, more authority than anybody else except for Pharaoh himself. And so God is going to use him. Listen, you might be the youngest, you might be the smallest, whatever it might be, God can use you. This is what happened with Joseph. This is what can happen. He wasn't his brother's favorite brother, but his daddy sure loved him. Wasn't afraid to let everybody know it. But you see, you can be used by God. And during this time, in these chapters, we find Joseph being used by God. We find Joseph taking the 7 years of goodness. In fact, the Bible tells us of that. It means of a whole bunch of grain coming in. And then we find that he is taken care of, that he makes sure thousands upon thousands upon thousands of lives are saved because of the knowledge that God gave Joseph. And then Pharaoh took and used and let Joseph lead the people. And we know when the famine came that eventually, who do you think is going to come to Egypt? His brothers. The very brothers who hated him. The very brothers who said, we'll never bow down to you. The same brothers. Do you think pride and arrogance had anything to do with his brothers? Just a little bit. But I want you to know what happens with Joseph. Now, would you say to yourself that sometimes I'm a little vindictive? I hope not, but sometimes, or maybe you may not use the word vindictive, you might say, I'll get you back. Okay, now, I want you to imagine for a moment, you now are in a position you can get back your haters. You can get back those ones who sold you into slavery. You can get back to those who didn't love you and didn't care about you, and you're sitting there, and they're before you, and they're begging for food. He did a few tricks to his brothers. See, he hadn't seen his younger brothers. He had some younger brothers. He didn't get to see them. And he did a few tricks along the way. Ultimately, he had his brothers brought back to him. Ultimately, his brothers had no idea who was this harsh Egyptian guy up here making us come back with our little brother. And Dad said if we don't come back with him, he would die. You see, here we see Joseph being used by God, that Joseph didn't become arrogant or prideful, but he allowed himself to be used by God. Because what can we do as Christians? Can we become prideful and arrogant? Yes. But I want you to know something. If you and I allow ourselves to be used by God, I want you to know something about Joseph. Okay? He was not divine. There's only one divine, and that's Jesus Christ. So, with that being the case, is it possible for you and me and for our church to react to God the same way that Joseph did? Yes. But we've got to want to. We've got to work at it. We've got to trust God with it. And here we see Joseph there. And in fact, it's very interesting that we see here in verse 42, verse 1, again, it says this. It says, when Jacob saw that there was grain in Egypt, Jacob said to his sons, why do you look for another? He said, indeed, I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down to that place. and buy for us there, that we may live and not die. And the Bible tells us that his brothers came. And if you look on just a little bit further down in chapter 42, verse 8, and it says this. It says, so Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. He could be going, I got him. They have no clue who I am. They have no idea. But the Bible tells us a little bit further down that he had to leave the room in his interactions that he had with his brothers because he was weeping. Because he had mercy on his brothers. He had mercy on who they were. And he did not hold it against them. Here were his brothers, the ones who hated him, the ones who sold him into slavery, the ones who sold him to where he's sitting at right now. And here we see a little bit further. It says on verse 9, it says, then Joseph remembered the dreams which he had dreamed about them, and said, you are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land. And they said unto him, no, my lord, but your servants have come to buy food. We are all one man's sons. We are honest men. Your servants are not spies. But he said to them, no, but you have come to see the nakedness of the land. And they said, your servants are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And in fact, the youngest is with our father today, and one is no more. Here they were. We're honest guys. And they just lied before their brother. He don't have a brother anymore. He died. They didn't know what they just said. Exactly what they just said. And there was their brother, who they thought was no more. There he was. And you see, and Joseph didn't lose anything. God didn't get upset about this. God loved him, and Joseph knew that he loved God back and had to serve him. So as we go on and we see this story unfolding, ultimately the Bible tells us that all of his brothers and all of the family members came down into Egypt because of the food that was there. In fact, the Bible tells us that Joseph treated them better. He didn't hold a grudge. As in your life and in my life, sometimes we got to work hard and not holding a grudge, don't we? Sometimes we do. We got to work hard at it sometimes. But God says, don't hold that grudge. If you want to be blessed, if I want to be blessed, if our church wants to be blessed, you got to take grudges and throw them out. Because they consume us. And here is Joseph. He could have been consumed, but he's not. Why not? Because the Bible tells us his character, and he knew that ultimately God had placed him there. Ultimately, we knew this. So I want you to know that even though somebody might do something to you with evil intentions, I promise you, his brothers didn't put him in that well and say, we love him so much. We'll see him again someday. No, they put him down and thinking, good riddance. Then they saw the caravan coming off the distance. They said, perfect. Never see him again. Little did they know that God was going to ultimately put them back together. But here we see this taking place. So there's just a couple of things I'd like to share with us here. Just a few things. Guys, what do we need to remember about the whole story of Joseph? What can we take? What can we apply? What can you write down in your Bible that you can put down and say, what can I learn from this story of Joseph? First and foremost, I want us to remember something. The same promises that God put forth in the Old Testament and they carried out and came true in the New Testament, we can trust the promises that God brings to us and says to us. One day, the promise is that the Lord is going to return. Let us never forget that. So here's the things I want to share with you very quickly. Let your faith be centered in God. Not in the person sitting next to you, not the person on your left or right or in front of you or behind you, but place your faith squarely in God. Squarely in God. What Joseph didn't he? I don't think he turned out, I don't think his circumstances were too bad. This day, I want you to see something else. Understand this. Serve God. Be devoted to God. Serving God with honor and dependability. Okay? It's important. In other words, if you say you're going to do something for God, follow through with it. For all of us. You see, didn't Joseph ultimately follow through with what he was going to do? Something else too. Don't be deterred by somebody who's trying to put a roadblock in front of you. Don't be deterred by it. Don't say, I can't do this, it's too hard. It's not going to happen anymore. They never would have built some of the things we built in this world if they would have said, that's too hard, I can't do it. There's something called the Transcontinental Railroad. You guys ever hear of it? Yeah, I promise you, along the way, there were some major obstacles that were there. Bridges, mountains, and other things. But they built it. They built it and it took place. Also something else. Be willing to forgive others that may have done you wrong. So that's what happened here with Joseph. He forgave them. Some of you don't have to forgive. Listen, if you don't forgive, if you can't forgive, if I can't forgive, it will eat us alive. It'll eat us alive. It'll dig at you and dig at you and dig at you, and it'll cause problems in your life. And it'll cause problems. Don't let that happen. Let it go. Also, too, be able to see the big picture. The big picture ultimately is not about you or me, is it? The big picture ultimately is about people seeing God through us. Right? That's what it's about. People seeing God, people knowing that we love God, people knowing that we care and we want them to know as well. So make sure we understand this. It is, and that God is going to do something else. He's interested in your life. There are way too many people out there who think God is not interested in my life because they let the circumstances of their life determine what they're going to do, how they're going to do it, what they're going to say, or what they're not going to say. So trust God with that. And I want us to remember this. God can use you at any age. Joseph, the Bible tells us, was 17 years old. I've heard people say, well, they're not old enough to be able to do that. They're not capable of doing this or doing that. But in reality, God can use anybody. And I want us to grab a hold of that. And we need to remember that. No, someone may not, a 17-year-old may not get the same responsibilities as a 37-year-old. But we still got to trust that we got to still trust God in what it is that He wants them to do. So in closing, this last verse, it says this. This is what Paul says to you and to me. He says this about character. Remember, Joseph was all about character. And he says this. He says to you and me, be an example to the believers in word. Be an example to the believers in conduct. Be an example to the believers in love. Be an example to the believers in spirit. Be an example to the spirit people around you by your faith. Be an example to the people around you by your purity. You can look that up if you'd like to. It's in 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 12. No, it's not as long as how I just made it because I made it personal. See, we need to make sure we understand here that God says, be an example in your words, in your deeds, in your actions, and everything that you want. Will you trust God this morning with your life? Even though people might be doing you wrong. Even though people might be thinking, you know what, they're not worth it. Will you let God have that right now? Brother Donnie, would you come?